Hello and welcome back to the second session of the Introduction to the Center for Resilient Leadership. As I promised in the last one, we're going to be talking today about neuroscience. I know it's a big word. People get really intimidated by the brain, but as I told you last time, I am not a neuroscientist. I am a teacher. So my goal is to take these concepts and make them really, really easy to understand. I did it for my students. I can do it for you. So I have created a model to help people understand the brain. It's called the Resilient Mindset Model. And this is a visual. I have Dion Wessels to thank for that. He is the designer that I've been working with to create these characters to represent different parts of the brain. So we're going to use those characters to help you understand what's happening in your brain when you are responding to challenge. Now that can be any challenge. It can be a good challenge, it can be a bad challenge, it can be a big challenge, it can be a small challenge. But this is what's taking place in your brain. If you're familiar with Aesop's fable, he talks about the ant and the grasshopper, and he says, once upon a time, there was an ant and a grasshopper. And it was summertime and it was beautiful out. And the ant said, ooh, I better think ahead. I better get prepared for winter. So he went and he worked really hard to gather food, to get shelter, and figure out what was going to happen for him for winter time. The grasshopper, on the other hand, said, boy, it's beautiful out today. I think I'll go out and I'll play. And he spent all his days during the summer playing and dancing and singing. And then come winter, he wasn't prepared. So David DeSteno is a psychologist out of Boston. And he has a really fun job. He actually puts people into moral dilemmas and sees what they do. And in his book, Out of Character, he talks about that most people think the decisions we make are good or bad. That if you picture the cartoons with the angel over one shoulder and the devil over the other, that we're always deciding between a good choice and a bad choice, an angel and a devil. He says, no, that's not the case. The more he studied, the more he realized that people weren't choosing between good and bad. They were choosing between long-term and short-term. It wasn't an angel and a devil, it was an ant and a grasshopper. And so I used his idea of the ant and the grasshopper to explain what's happening in your brain. When we face challenge, we have part of our brain that's in charge of our long-term choices. And that's the ant. Kind of like the ant in Aesop's fable was planning ahead for winter. We have part of our brain that's in charge of our long-term decisions, and that's the ant. And the ant lives in our frontal lobe and our prefrontal cortex. That's really the thinking part of our brain. So when we're studying for a test, when we're doing that long-term report and planning ahead for that project that we've got, when we're ordering the salad instead of the burger for lunch, we're thinking ahead to the long term. When we're putting money in the bank instead of buying that item that we really feel like right now, we're using the ant part of our brain. We're using this part. The grasshopper, on the other hand, is in charge of our short-term decisions. If we decide, you know what, I really want that burger right now, that's usually our grasshopper talking. And the grasshopper lives in the limbic system of the brain. And the limbic system is where our emotions are held. So a lot of those short-term decisions are emotional. When we order that burger, we really feel like we want that. We don't really want the salad. The salad is a long-term decision. So when we make decisions for the short term, we're using the grasshopper part of our brain, or the limbic system. This visual can also be found on my website, so if you want to see it, it's www.centerforresilientleadership.com, so you can see it as a close-up. I know it's kind of hard to see it in this video. So we have the ant in our brain who's in charge of our long-term choices. We have the grasshopper who's in charge of our short-term choices and our short-term survival. When we feel threatened, the grasshopper, the limbic system, is in charge of fight or flight. It's in charge of getting us out of the way if we've got a car coming at us. So it's really good. The grasshopper is strong, the grasshopper is fast. If we wanted to get out of the way of the car and we were using our ant, we'd probably get squished. So the grasshopper is not bad, it's very good, but so is the ant. It's just long-term, short-term decisions. Third character that represents part of our brain is the glowworm. And the glowworm lives in the amygdala. It's that little red dot right there. And the amygdala is part of the limbic system. The limbic system, as I said, was the emotions. That special part called the amygdala, which is where the glowworm lives, is in charge of looking out for threat. Our brain was always created to keep us surviving. So it has that special place that is always on the lookout for threat. So if a car is coming at us, then the glowworm is in charge of switching control of the brain from the ant to the grasshopper so that we can get out of the way. And all those neurochemicals come to help us hop out of the way. So the glowworm is always on the lookout for threat. When she experiences threat, she goes to red alert. She calls out the grasshopper. He gets into fight or flight mode, and we get out of the way, which is helpful for our survival. Makes sense? So we have the ant for long-term decisions, the grasshopper for short-term survival. We have the glowworm, who's in charge of figuring out who's in control of the brain, and she's always looking out for threat. And the final character is the dragonfly. And the dragonfly is in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And the dragonfly is in charge of mindfulness, self-awareness, and situational awareness. The dragonfly can kind of take off and see what part of the brain are we in. Are we in grasshopper mode? Do we want to be in grasshopper mode? Are we in ant mode? Do we want to be in ant mode? Is the person we're talking to in grasshopper mode or ant mode? And then being able to understand how to respond accordingly. And we're going to talk, when we talk about mindfulness in the next section, we're going to be talking a lot about the dragonfly. And the final piece of the model that's really important to understand is right down here, and you can see it when you go on the website, there's an acronym, REACTS. And REACTS stands for the social threats and rewards to the brain. Our brain interprets physical threat and social threat in a very, very similar way. And so just like the car coming at us can threaten that glowworm and get us to switch over to grasshopper mode, there are a lot of social threats and rewards that can also trigger that response. And REACTS is an acronym that stands for respect, equity, alliances, control, territory, and similarity. Those are the things that can trigger that amygdala and trigger that response to get our grasshopper up and running and ready to fight or flight. And sometimes in social situations, that's what we want to do, and sometimes it's really not what we want to do. So that was the brain in 8 minutes, or less actually with the introduction. And that gives the basis of the resilient mindset model and what the neuroscience of that is. What's happening in our brain when we're responding to challenge? The next video is going to be about mindfulness. I look forward to seeing you. Hope you continue on the journey. Thank you.